I wore my tags today because I was at the Skills Finland thing, and this tag will get me in 2019. But this is my VIP pass from 2018, so that allowed me to get in the cafeteria and eat the food. Okay, do you think everybody's here? You think this is it? The important people are. And me, I'm here too. Well, I went to Riveria College in Joensuu, Finland. And let's see, how does this work? Flew across the globe. And all these big cities I flew right past because I just went up to Helsinki, and then from Helsinki I took a little prop jet over from Helsinki's down here. I flew up to Joensuu, which is about 75,000 people in East Finland. This whole area is called East Finland, and it was in Upper Karelia. So I was really only about 45 kilometers from the border of Russia. But I wasn't up here where Santa Claus was. You've been up there? Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's where David White went there with Matti. Matti was up here somewhere, but I was down south. It started to darken about 10 o'clock at night. It didn't really ever get dark out, so we had to pull down these drapes so that you could sleep at night, and I was suffering from jet lag and got there Sunday night, and then was supposed to get up and go with Kari for Monday morning. And he knocked on the door about 8 o'clock and said, "Okay, time to go." And I was still in bed. And I threw on some clothes and wet my hair to get ready to go. He said, "Wait, no, you got to take a shower first." Apparently he could tell. So he went in a little bit late that morning. Finland has 188,000 lakes, and if you look on the map all around Joensuu, it's more water than it is land. Fun facts, they say. President every 6 years. Oops. And they used the euro, which was handy, but then I met my wife afterwards in London. They didn't use the euro, so all that money was useless. They're doing the Brexit thing right now in England. But the saunas were really important to them. And I figured out the reason that there are so few Buddhists in Finland, because the sauna does the same thing to a person that meditation does for Buddhism. So they're sort of nipping it in the bud there. They also eat a lot of ice cream, but I didn't get that for some reason. Coffee, they got a pretty good deal at the college there that I was at. Every day you get there about 9:30, 9:45, have your first class, but then at 10 o'clock, 8:30, 8:45. You get there about 8:30, 8:45, but then at 10 o'clock, everybody takes a coffee break. And the faculty kind of gather around and chit-chat. And they actually, I think, get work done by getting to know each other a little bit that way. The students, whenever the students arrive, there's a buffet for them. The faculty gets served because it's a hospitality and culinary school, the campus that I was on. They have 5 campuses. It's a vocational technical college with 5 different campuses, but forestry and some of the engineering kinds of programs are on other campuses. But our campus was mostly hospitality and culinary. Although they didn't serve ice cream, I don't know why. Rye bread, I had rye bread every morning for breakfast. Good, strong coffee. I didn't miss my Starbucks. The only Starbucks I saw the whole time was in the Helsinki airport, but once you got through customs, you couldn't get back. So I made the mistake of going through customs first before trying to get my coffee. And then I was stuck in the airport for 6 hours. Not knowing my way around, I couldn't really leave the airport and come back because I didn't know. So it was too long to just sit there, but it wasn't long enough to actually go and make sure I got back an hour or two before I had to catch my flight to Joensuu in eastern Finland. Kari was here in October with us, and here he is in his native habitat. He has 2 sons and a wife, and I stayed with them, and I just sat at the table while they brought me stuff to eat. It was interesting that all the homes that I experienced were much smaller than what we would have. And they had a washer dryer machine that was kind of a mini version of what one of our washing machines would be. But then it had the built-in dryer into the single thing. And so I did have clean clothes about halfway through my trip. So this is the dean of the college that I was at, and that's me on the right. And I gave her this, that's her own phone. But they were very welcoming. Riviera is a vocational technology college in Joensuu. And Joensuu has about 75,000 people, about 100,000 in the area. 6,000 students at Riviera. About 2/3 of them are from Finland, many of them local, although they have a couple of dormitories. And then about 1/3 of the students are from throughout the European Union, because some of the programs are very well known throughout the region. So they have, these engineering, and I don't even know what they're called. But this is one campus I went out to, which was pretty far away. And their emphasis is Finland is forestry, that's what it is. Forestry and mining programs, although I didn't really see that. So when I first got there, I thought, gee, is this really kind of a mismatch, because they don't have any, they don't have a philosophy program. what can I learn from hospitality? But I found it was a very worthwhile experience anyway. The emphasis on learning by doing was pretty fascinating. And so this semester I'm trying to emphasize doing more in my philosophy classes. What are the actual skills that I want students to have? So less about learning material than learning skills. One of the things I observed, I didn't get to meet any of my favorite Finnish philosophers. They're all in Helsinki, which is a long ways away. It was an hour and a half plane ride from where I was. So all of the things that drew me to Finland were in other parts of Finland. Santa Claus was up north with the reindeer, and the philosophers were over in Helsinki. But my hosts were very gracious in trying to mold my visit to things that were relevant to my own interests. And since I teach philosophy of religion and I teach world religions, I focused a lot of my experiences on religion locally in Finland, and in Eastern Finland in particular. The area that I was at was quite heavily influenced by the Russian Orthodox Church. The Finnish Orthodox are distinct from the Russian Orthodox and are under the leadership of the Patriarch of Constantinople. So they're not under the Moscow Patriarchate. That was part of, I had a great time. I went to the St. Nicholas Church in Joensuu and met with a priest there. And we had a very interesting conversation because he told me some of the history of how the Finnish church had been Finns and Russians, but when the borders between the two countries became sort of set, the Finnish church at one point asked to come under the leadership of Constantinople rather than Moscow. And there was a revolution, a sort of civil war back about 100 years ago, I think. And Joensuu was one of the sites where there had been part of the rebellion. And so some complex history there, but what that meant was that the Orthodox Church in Finland defined itself as distinct from the Orthodox Church in Russia. Even though many of the Finns had, many of the Finnish Orthodox had been in the monasteries on the Russian side of the border at one point. So I visited one of the monasteries. That's very, very well known, and then a monastery north of that, which was a nunnery. Interesting point, they didn't want you taking pictures of the priests and the monks, but they gave a little tour, a little 20-minute tour, but for some reason ours lasted an hour and 40 minutes because some foreigner kept asking questions all the time. One of the things that struck me, Finland has become very secularized, in part because there's a state church, so everybody pays a portion of their earnings into the state church, unless you opt out. Okay, so it's assumed that you're opting in, and you either opt in to the Orthodox Church or to the Lutheran State Church. What that means is there's not quite the consumer orientation toward religion that there is in the States, because it's just sort of assumed that you're Lutheran. And one of the churches that one of the things that struck me was, although there are churches that look like churches, most of the churches that I saw didn't look like churches to me. And certainly from the outside, there might be a cross, or there might just be a little stand out here. This was a church, and there was a table. Nothing was open at the time that I went this one. This was just around the corner one day, and I could go up and kind of look into the window. This was a service that I went to. The Joensuu has sort of a cathedral church for the parish. I went to that, but couldn't get in. It was all locked up. And my host got into contact, and it turned out that they meet in another building where they have sort of a diocesan office. And I found out that once a month they have an English service. So I went to the English service, in which the first verse was in Finnish, and then the second verse was in Swedish, and then the third verse was in English. So they had a choir performing. It was quite exciting, and the choir was African students at the Eastern Finland University. So I had a chance to talk with them. I talked with the cantor also, who I had experienced at a Sunday service. And he was an opera singer, or is an opera singer, and works at the church part-time, but just a basso profundo voice. He was outstanding. So it wasn't congregational singing so much. It was at the Sunday service, he would just sing the liturgy, and the minister would lead the worship. The Sunday I was there was Orphan Sunday, and what happens in these Lutheran churches is you go to confirmation when you're about 13, 14 years old, and then you graduate, and then you never go to church again. So the service I went to had about 25 older people. I say old people, I mean people my age, you know, people like me, sitting in the back. And the rest of the church was empty. The minister came in, the organist, cantor came in. And then they brought in about 30 students who were going through confirmation, who had no idea what was going on, but as part of their confirmation, they should experience at least one church service. And the minister preached to them about how it was rewarding. I didn't know what they were saying, but it was in Finnish. But apparently the service was about the young people would get something out of church if they gave it a try. And so when I talked to my host, Kari and his wife, they were both Lutheran. They had been confirmed, and they never go to church. So that's typical. I did talk to a minister at one of the fairs that I attended, and he said that about 85% of people are members of the state church or the Orthodox Church. But in recent decades, that's going down about 1% a year. Each year, or it had been 85 and now it's like 76 or something like that, that they're losing membership because people are opting out because that gives them a 1% increase in their salary, right? It's a way of not being taxed 1% of your income. I also had the chance to visit with a minister of a free church and one of his congregants. And since it's a free church, they don't get any subsidy from the government. Because they don't get any subsidy from the government, they have to take offerings and that kind of thing. But it's more of an evangelical, and certainly the people show up or you close those churches. Right? But it's apparent that the state churches are quite frugal in what they fund. Many of the churches that still look like churches are open as sort of museum and tourist places. Yeah.
So the people that don't go to church after they're confirmed, are they, from your experience, spiritual? Do they?
They do use their saunas, yes. Yeah. So it's I'm being a little facetious, but I did, there was a coffee house. I was walking down the street and they had a little welcome sign out, and in the window they had an announcement and an Israeli flag, and it said 70 something something in Finnish. So I realized that they were commemorating the 70th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. So I went into this coffee shop, and it was an evangelical Christian coffee shop. They had a birthday cake that they were offering to people, coffee and birthday cake, and they had a book display. And I tried to talk to them, but there wasn't anybody whose English was really good enough to talk to, and I know no Finnish. So, we did the best we could. So there are religious groups, but it's not as pervasive as it is. It's more of a secularized culture. It's sort of what I envision. It's sort of what I've heard of, like the Northwest, right? Washington, Oregon, that kind of mentality where the churches don't have as much people aren't as religious as they are here in the Midwest.
So in what way is the sauna spiritual?
So in what way is that spiritual?
Saunas. What do they get
The
out of it?
sauna is personal time and communal time. The sauna, I went to a sauna party of the faculty. There were about 15, maybe 20 faculty, and so we went to another campus that had a sauna large enough for us to use. So we had a smaller sauna for the men and then a larger one that the women used. And Kari, of course, had a sauna in his own home, which he used about every day. I was not into it, not being religious myself. Or, not being spiritual myself, whatever. Right? So I went to the sauna party, and it started with beer and cognac.
How's the sweating going?
So to get it right, and then we did the sauna for about 10 minutes, which was plenty for me. And it's a wet sauna. They let me try throwing the water onto the rocks, the hot rocks, and then the steam pours off, and then you can't breathe, and then you can, and then anyway, that didn't take me long to wear out on that, and then we had a party afterwards. I mean, just lots of food, just all kinds of food, and all kinds of drinks, but certainly the experience of the sauna itself, apart from all the party atmosphere, the sauna itself is it's a meditative experience. It's a letting down of the frustrations and the things that tense you up. It's a relaxation technique. It's a unwinding technique, and that's why I called it spiritual. Right? Yeah.
Do they talk while they're in the sauna, or is it more?
Oh yeah. I mean, if there are several people, then you talk and you chit chat and tell stories and that kind of thing. One of the men that I was in with was telling me all about, he was Finnish Orthodox, so he was telling me about the priest that I had met the day before that I had had the conversation with at St. Nicholas. Oh, who'd you talk to? I said, he said, oh yeah, he's really a terrific priest, and so, yeah,
Sounds like a bonfire for us.
it's kind of like a bonfire, yeah. Only you don't smell like smoke afterwards. Yeah. Although I assume that some saunas are like actual wood-fired saunas, but this was, like my fireplace at home. Yeah. Let's see. So learning by doing. There were a lot of experiences. A lot of it was learning by just standing around, because when you learn by doing, you take turns. And so one of the things that I went to, the students were learning to do pomme flambe. They were learning to set slices of apple on fire and caramelizing those. So each student had to take their turn, and you know, they were, the students were holding the apple in one hand and looking at their phone with the other, and that kind of thing. This was, you know, we shot some, we did some archery, we did some rock climbing. I think there was this one thing where you were hung up on a tree and there were these crates. And what you did was you tried to stack up sit on as many crates as you could. And, you know, 15, 20 crates, you're up 30 feet in the air. I did 7. I thought I was doing pretty good to get far enough up that my feet didn't touch the ground before I toppled over, you know. Skills Fest, Skills Finland. This is my tag for next year, 2019. That'll get me in, but this is my VIP pass this year. This one is me here, and then another one of our faculty members, actually this is Vejo. He was one of my hosts at the sauna. And then 2 other faculty from a different school. We were the token restaurant clients, going to this fancy restaurant. This young woman was our hostess or server, whatever. She took our order. We had to drink a bottle of wine before we got our aperitif, and then we had a salad plate and some kind of the beginning of appetizer, right? And then we ordered the main meal, which included her setting it on fire with cognac. It was a meat of some sort. I don't know all the technical terminology, but and then an after dinner drink, and then a cognac and a dessert and that kind of thing. So we had to go through that. And this gentleman with the velvet stole was the judge, the head judge of the hospitality kind of competition that was involved. All of these people were watching it and wondering how they could become one of the token people here. So, yeah, here's the crates, and they'd hand you a crate, and then you'd have to put it on top of the crates underneath it between your legs and adjust to sit on it. And of course, eventually you fall off. I think I got about that high. And this young woman got about twice as high as me. And one of the young men, I think he did 18 of them. He was up there. He was up there. Here's an artist, student doing some artwork. One Saturday we went on a trip around Joensuu to experience the different art, forms of art that were going on. This is Kari's wife, Atula, and this is the Art Museum of Joensuu, which was really nice. Anyway, I did have some sort of learnings from my trip that hospitality has something to teach me, And I've sort of hinted at some of those. I was struck by how evangelicalism seems to have an appeal in secular cultures that since it's sort of like the state church and the Orthodox church really don't have to try that hard because they're not asking people for money all the time. So they're less consumerist in their orientation. They don't have to sell their product quite the way that evangelicals have to sell their product. And so as a result, my sense is that, and this is colored somewhat in that after I left Finland, I met my wife in London, and we visited a lot of churches there as well. So I'm kind of going by what I observed in London as well as what I saw in Finland. I was struck by the university education. I did have a chance to meet one of the professors at the University of Eastern Finland and spent a couple hours with him over lunch and did a tour of his department. He is a theology professor in practical theology and they have two, because it's a state university, they have two sets of faculty. They have an Orthodox faculty and a state church faculty. And he is a Pentecostal theologian who works in practical theology, so church counseling, pastoral care, that kind of stuff. And he had just been to a world conference that brought all different kinds of Christians from around the world, from Africa, from East Asia, as well as Latin America and Europe and North America as well. So it was interesting to hear his perspective as someone who has been outside the state church as a Pentecostal and then come in to state church faculty as a practical theologian. Saw the library at the university, and he said that students don't buy books. Everything that they need is either in the library or available online through web kind of resources and search engines that the university subscribes to. And, you know, at the community college, I didn't see any books either. I did find a bookstore in Tampere. And Tampere was where we had the Skills Fest. That was about 120 miles east of where I was most of the time. And I had a little time one morning, so I went around the town and found a big department store that had a book section. And there weren't a whole lot of philosophy books, and they were in Finnish anyway. So, and I already had some of them in their English versions. But they do respect philosophers. Soren Kierkegaard was on the wing of this Norwegian plane when I was at the airport getting ready to leave. I said, oh, they had famous people on the back wings of their airplane. I spent one of my last days, they took me up to Kali National Park, where I could look over and see Russia across the lakes there. Beautiful. It was cold. I was there in May, so there was still snow on the ground. And although this was the only day that I actually was comfortable wearing the clothes I took with me. Because when I went, I said, I looked on weather.com or one of those sites, and it told me what the weather was supposed to be the last week of the middle of May in Finland, and it was about 15 degrees warmer every day I was there. So trying to not pay the luggage fee, I only packed long sleeve shirts, and that didn't work. So I was always too hot for the weather. I also went to Science Fest, and this was in Joensuu mainly for school-age kids. And I was struck that the Chinese government sponsors the Confucius Institutes around the world. And there's a very active one at the University of Helsinki. And they had a very strong presence at the Sci-Fest convention that I went to. And for my last slide, the art museum at Joensuu has probably the most famous Finnish painting, according to my hosts, the most famous Finnish painting of all, Virginie by Albert Edelfelt. Kari's wife, Tulis, told me that this painting is the Finnish Mona Lisa. I guess that's it. Any questions or other observations? I left a lot out, but Ron.
Things looked so clean. Are they like our German friends who do not throw down candy wrappers and Coke cans all over the place?
Not all over the place. There was a lot of construction in Joensuu around the downtown area. That wasn't as clean as some other places, but certainly there wasn't the trash that you see around in Chicago, for example. But it was pretty clean. It was pretty clean.
Is it known about what percent of the population is Orthodox?
Yeah, Orthodox, I don't remember exactly, maybe 5% Orthodox and 80% Lutheran, something like that.
Is the religion mixed with the government? Is that part of making laws and that sort of thing? Was the religion involved in that?
There wasn't a separation of church and state. That tradition, yeah, it's the state government is a secular government. What happens if you pay your religion tax, if you don't opt out, then you get the services of the church. Your kids get confirmed. You can have a church wedding, although that's less popular than it used to be. And you get a church funeral, baptisms, that kind of stuff. It's sort of a fair share thing, right? Yeah. It's not, so, but it's, yeah, the minister, one of the ministers I talked to he was a young man, maybe 32 years old or something, and had served for 3 years in Australia, and now is working to start a church in Tampere, where I went to this skills conference, skills competition. And what he's trying to do, it's a state Lutheran church, but he is part of a team that is starting congregations that appeal to younger people. And so it sounded to me like what an evangelical church would do here in America. As I talked to him, but his sort of viewpoints, one of the things that came up with the Orthodox priest was, he said they've had a number of converts in recent years, converting to Orthodoxy. And he said one of the reasons that they convert to Orthodoxy is because of traditional values, that people who are drawn to Orthodoxy are often people who are opposed to same-sex marriage, for example. And I think my sense is the state church is behind pro same-sex marriage, but the evangelicals and the Orthodox are opposed to that, and so there's a similar cultural wars kind of thing going on in the secular society, and the religion's relation to that. That it's certainly not as open and antagonistic as it is in American society, because there's not the same sort of move to impose religion on the broader society. So the priest said, I said, well, you know, how many are we talking? Because there are about 6,000 Orthodox in Joensuu, in his parish. And he said about 30 a year, 20 to 30 a year, which is a significant number out of, you know, but it's not a huge number, right? But there are at least some people who see Orthodoxy as a safe space away from certain cultural changes that are happening. Does that make sense?
Is there a penalty if they opt out?
No.
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 So if you're an agent,
But so many, and I asked Kari about that, but it's like, there's still a big sense that it's something you do, right? You're not religiously observant that much. So, for example, I was there on Thursday was a holiday. Thanks. Thursday was a holiday. I said, what holiday is it? It's a national holiday, and well, it's sort of some church holiday. But nobody knew what it was. They thought it was Pentecost, and it was in Finnish, so I had no idea what it was. myself, and I wasn't really thinking. It was actually Ascension Day, which is a day off work. The banks are closed. That's the day we went and visited the monastery. And the Finnish Orthodox are the only Orthodox church in the world that observes the Western calendar. So, so it was Ascension Day, the day 10 days before Pentecost when Jesus ascends into heaven. And then 10 days later, Sunday is Pentecost. So 40 days after Easter. And Pentecost is 50 days after Easter. But nobody knew what that was. They just knew that it was a day when there wasn't school. Yeah, it was a day off work, banks are closed, no mail, that kind of stuff. But thanks.
It's like Columbus Day.
Like Columbus Day, yeah.
It's-
Only in the middle of the week like that, that didn't make sense. So there's a lot of, yeah, but people, they send their kids to confirmation. Confirmation really isn't connected. I mean, it doesn't really inculcate the kids into being religious people,
It's just
but
something-
it's something they go through.
And I think it's very similar to what's happening in America now too, that people are stepping away from faith. And the Finnish culture that I was exposed to, they're very social. They still do all these things together. Their faith is just part of their culture. Kind of you take it for granted so you don't think a lot about it, and no one's making you go. There was a Catholic church in Helsinki, and they respected faiths. Church of the Rock, that's beautiful. If you ever get a chance to go back, it's just gorgeous. But it's not their primary focus. They're they are a socially conscious people to begin with, and the faith, however they act it out, is just part of what they do. And
Yeah.
Did your host, were his kids confirmed or no?
Yes,
Okay.
they
It
had
was
been
not something
confirmed
that
when
they
that was the.
regularly did religious
But so.
Sundays.
When I was trying to get in touch with this English service, but I didn't know where it was going to be and all this, and there had been a flyer on one of the boards at the college, and I mentioned this to Kari, and then, he recognized the name of the pastor, because 13 years ago he had been the pastor then too, or something, right? They had some connection, and that was probably, he had recollection of that because it had been the time that his kids had been confirmed or something. So he knew the name, he knew the person, but it was sort of like, oh yeah, I know that,
Givens, yeah.
But yeah, there's not a sense that religion is life encompassing,
Right.
the way that there often is for those among us who are religious, right?
And governmentally, they're much more open, seemingly to me, in the rules that they do have, like regarding same-sex marriage and such. So, I don't know. Very liberal. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, I had a great time. I need to go back because I didn't see Helsinki, and there is sort of a Helsinki and the rest of Finland feeling.
Yeah.
And so I saw a little tiny bit of the rest of Finland, but not Helsinki.
In my tour, we went through Tampere and Oulu and Rovaniemi. So it was
Okay,
just really beautiful.
okay.
And
Yeah.
got to see Santa. And I got a picture with him. It was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching this video.